Today we are going to discuss about the lumbar vertebra. So this is a lumbar vertebra. There are total 5 lumbar vertebrae in a vertebral column, and these include the typical and the atypical vertebra. The typical vertebra includes L1 to L4, and the atypical vertebra is only the 5th lumbar vertebra. So what are the features of the typical vertebra? First we will discuss about the typical vertebra. So in my hand there is a typical vertebra. So this is a typical lumbar vertebra. So what are the features of the typical lumbar vertebra? First of all, we have to appreciate the parts of the typical lumbar vertebra. This is the body. This is the body of the vertebra. This typical vertebra. These are the pedicles. These are the pedicles, and these are the laminas. This is a lamina. This is the spine, and these are the transverse processes. Body, pedicles, lamina, spine, transverse processes, and the superior articular processes and the inferior articular processes. These are the parts of the typical lumbar vertebra, and here is the vertebral canal. This is a triangular shaped vertebral canal. So now we will discuss one by one all the parts. This is the first of all the body. This is the body of the typical vertebra. A typical lumbar vertebra, the body's shape is kidney shaped. You can notice it is a kidney or bean shaped, and you can also notice that there is a upper border and there is a lower border. Now the height of the body is larger anteriorly. This is the anterior aspect of this body, and it is larger anteriorly, and as you will move posteriorly, the height of the body will get shorter. So as you will move posteriorly, the height of the lumbar vertebra will get shorter, and it will contribute to the convexity of the lumbar spine. So lumbar vertebra, it will contribute to the convexity of the lumbar vertebra due to this difference in the heights. Anteriorly it is larger, and as you will move posteriorly it will get shorter, so it will contribute to the convexity. Now the body is kidney shaped, and the upper aspect and the lower aspect of the body, you can notice it is rough. And it is in contact with the intervertebral discs. So this is this is about the body, and the further attachments if we see on the body is the upper border and the lower border. In the median plane, it gives attachment to the anterior longitudinal ligament anteriorly and the posterior longitudinal ligament posteriorly. So anteriorly is the anterior longitudinal ligament, on posteriorly there is a posterior longitudinal ligament. Lateral to this anterior longitudinal ligament on the anterior aspect, there are the crura of the diaphragm. So if we look, this is the right side and this is the left side. On the right side, from the body of the L1, L2 and L3 vertebra, there is the origin of the right crus of the diaphragm, like in this manner. The right crus of diaphragm will ascend upwards. So lateral to the anterior longitudinal ligament, on the right side we have the right crus of diaphragm, first, second and third. On the left side we have the left crus of diaphragm, but the left crus of diaphragm rises from the body of the first and second lumbar vertebra. So these are the crura of the diaphragm which are attached to the body. Now still lateral to the crura of the diaphragm, here in on the sides, there is the origin of the psoas major. The body gives origin to the psoas major muscle. So these are the attachments of the body. Now we will come towards the pedicles. You can notice that in the lumbar vertebra, the pedicles are very short. The pedicles are very short as compared to the thoracic vertebrae. And you can also notice that this is the inferior vertebral notch. It is very sharp, you can notice. But there is, you can say, very ill-defined superior vertebral notch. So the inferior vertebral notch is very well defined as compared to the superior vertebral notch in the pedicles of the lumbar vertebrae. So, and next one is the lamina. These are the lamina. The lamina are projecting backward and medially. The lamina are also shorter, so they will project backwards and medially. and they will form spine. The spine is, you can see in its lumbar vertebra, it is not very vertical, it is horizontal. So it is horizontal in nature. And another identification feature of the lumbar vertebra, typical lumbar vertebra, is that the superior articular processes are wider apart as compared to the inferior articular processes. You can notice that the superior articular processes are wider apart, inferior ones are very close. So if you are given a vertebra and you have to identify it whether it is lumbar, thoracic, you can identify them from the thoracic vertebra as their superior articular processes will be wider as compared to the inferior articular processes. And the body is also large and kidney shaped. These are the identification points. And another identification point of the lumbar vertebra is that on the transverse process, this is a transverse process and this is also a transverse process, that is bit broken. So on the transverse process, you can notice that there are no articular facets. The articular facets are absent. So this is also an identification point of the lumbar vertebra. The structures which are related to the these processes, this, first of all, the spine. The spine is attached, giving attachment to the posterior layer of the lumbar fascia, and there are two ligaments. One is the interspinous and one is the supraspinous ligament. Between the two spines, inferior borders, this is the inferior border of first spine, and there will be the superior border of the lower spine. These two are providing attachment to the interspinous ligament, and the supraspinous ligament will be attached along the posterior border. So inferior border and the superior border of the lower one, they will provide attachment to the interspinous ligaments, and the posterior borders will provide attachment to the lumbar fascia, posterior layer of the lumbar fascia, and the supraspinous ligaments. The pedicles are related to the spinal nerves. Now you can also see there is a vertebral foramen. This vertebral foramen is triangular in shape. First lumbar vertebra, the vertebral foramen contains the conus medullaris, and in the lower four vertebra, the vertebral foramen contains the chorda equina. So these are the structures which are present in the vertebral foramen of the lumbar vertebra. And the another feature is that these are the lamina. On the inner surface of these lamina, on the inner surface, there is a ligament that is called as ligamentum flavum. On both lamina, on the inner surface, there will be the ligamentum flavum. So these are the structures which are related to these processes. There is another process which is called the mammillary process. It is present most commonly on the posterior border of this superior articular process. You can notice there is a broken area here. One broken area here and other is the here. These are actually representing the mammillary process. So for the sake of convenience, we can say that here it is a mammillary process on the right side, and this was the mammillary process on the left side, which is a broken area. Attachments on the transverse processes. This is the anterior surface of the transverse process, this is the tip of the transverse process, and this is the posterior surface of the transverse process. The anterior surface of the transverse process has a faint vertical ridge here. This is a faint vertical ridge. This is the faint vertical ridge. Lateral, medial to this faint vertical ridge is the region of the psoas major. We know that psoas major was also arising from the sides of the bodies of the vertebra, of the first to fifth lumbar vertebra. But psoas major also arises from the transverse process medial to this faint vertical ridge. And lateral to the and this faint vertical ridge actually also provides attachment to the anterior layer of the lumbar fascia. Anterior layer of the lumbar fascia is attached to this faint vertical ridge, and medially there is a psoas major. The tip of the transverse process provides attachment to the middle layer of the lumbar fascia, and moreover we know that there are from the crura, when the diaphragm is ascending up above, so the crura are converting into the medial arcuate ligament and then into the lateral arcuate ligaments. So these tips are providing attachment to the the medial and the lateral arcuate ligaments on both sides. So these are the providing attachment to the medial and lateral arcuate ligament, and on the posterior surface there is the origin of the muscle which is known as longismus thoracis. So these are the attachments of the muscles on the transverse processes. Just notice that the superior articular processes bear the concave facets. These are the concave facets, and the inferior articular processes bears the convex facets. So this convexity and concavity of the superior articular processes and the inferior articular processes is responsible for the lateral deviation and extension of the lumbar vertebra. So this orientation and this the anatomical structures, these are basically responsible for the movements of the lumbar spine, because this is concave and the above the vertebra that will be above its inferior articular processes will be convex in nature, so both will combine and will draw some rotatory movements. So this is responsible for the rotatory movements of the lumbar spine. We previously noticed that there were two mammillary processes that are represented by the broken areas here. So these are providing attachment to the multifidus and the medial transversus muscles. So these are providing attachment to these two muscles, the mammillary processes. So that is all about the lumbar vertebra.